Silas Demary Jr. is in the portal. This is one of the top level guards in the portal, I would say. Played at Georgia this past season and was one of the best players on Georgia, one of the primary options, a guy that can certainly fill it up at the highest level in the biggest conference in college hoops. And some reporting is coming out of who exactly is after Silas right now. And he's set to take his first two visits to St. John's and UConn early this week. That's per Travis Branham. Other schools involved for Silas that I have seen include Kentucky, Auburn, BYU, amongst others. But I think there's a lot of schools that I haven't named out of these five that are either going to be listed and or are trying to get involved in the Silas Demery recruitment. So a lot of ways we could break this one down, Riley, but what's your general thoughts on Silas and where his recruitment will be headed?
My general thoughts on him is he's probably my favorite guard in the portal right now, just when you factor in the size, the shot making, doing it in the SEC. Here's one of my favorite stats over Georgia's final 10 games. He averaged nearly three made threes, and that was not a strength of his coming into his college career. Shot 38.7% over those last 10 games. So there's, I think, some untapped upside, like a level he hasn't reached yet, can play make a little bit. And to me, he's like the perfect blend of banking on young talent, continuing to progress, but also has a pretty high floor just with his, I mean, he's a legit 6'5". And I wouldn't say he's necessarily a point guard, but you can run some offense through him as well. Just it's easy to envision him getting into the right system and flourishing even more than we saw down the stretch of this past season. Like I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at him come January talking about how he was one of the three best transfers or something, and he's averaging like 18, 5, and 5 or something like that. I'm a big fan of his game.
Yeah, he feels like a dude that's a long way away from his ultimate ceiling, which is like the nicest praise I can give a kid because he's only played 2 years in college. And I think you go through his whole season here. I think he got way better as the season went on. I think the final 2 months of his season are the best he's ever looked in a college
Hmm.
basketball uniform. And he was good at the beginning of the year, don't get me wrong, but he didn't have a 20-point game until February 8th. He had three 20-point games at the end of the season. He had a 19-point game, 18-point game, a couple 16-point games. He had 24 in the SEC tournament against Oklahoma. He just took it to a new level. It's like everything clicked. And a lot of times that happens with guys at the end of a certain point in their career. And it feels like he's gone from this prospect to this first option type killer that, maybe there's questions if he's your first option, how good is your team? Georgia
Right.
was an NCAA tournament team. Like you can clearly be a good team with Silas being a featured player. But I think with a lot of the schools recruiting him, maybe he slots into being a second or third option on a really loaded team that ends up reaping the benefits of his progression.
Yeah, I think I don't want to contradict myself now saying he could be one of the three best transfers come like January of next year or something to where I could see him getting to that point where he is the first option on a really good team. If I had to highlight like one area, you would expect him to be a better finisher just based on his size. He doesn't quite get to the rim and honestly finish as efficiently as I would like to. But the hope would be, year three gets under, I would say finds a coaching upgrade to Mike White. Even you look at those first two schools, St. John's or UConn, like getting under Hurley's tutelage in that offense, or even the way we've seen Patino kind of let his guards rock out this past year with Kadari Richmond or RJ Lewis. Like to me, it's easy to, I can envision him getting to that level. But even if he doesn't, you still, let's say he goes to one of those two schools or goes to Kentucky or Florida or some of the other schools that are in the mix that are going to put good talent around him. I just think it's gonna make his game easier, it come more naturally, and you're going to see some of those leaps. Just because, like, yeah, you said it. This Georgia team was good, not great. I mean, who was the second best guard on Georgia? Was it Blue Kane? That was
Probably
the
Blue
only dude.
Kane, yeah.
Blue Kane. I mean, I know he was had a little pedigree as a recruit, but he was just so up and down. Like the shooting specialist who can't really. Well, he was 37% in conference play, but that's I don't know. Like what does Blue Kane do? aside from like being inconsistent at making threes, and having a cool name. That's why I think if you put him next to some better guards, that's where I think it unlocks him whether he is that first option or whether he's the number two. But yeah, both of those first two visits, I'm super intrigued by the fit there because I trust Patino, I trust Hurley to get the most out of this kid.
Yeah, I agree. I like all the schools that are being mentioned. This is a kid I'd love to throw on like Michigan priority lists and feel like we have a chance, but shockingly, this is one of the only players that Michigan hasn't been all over trying to get after. So, um,
I
which is,
mean, you and me both, brother. He's from Raleigh, North Carolina, and Carolina feels like a long shot at this point when
yeah,
I would love Silas in Carolina blue.
yeah, just a guy that you know is going to be prioritized by some of the biggest, most resourced programs in the sport right now. So, for me, that means I have to idly pass and watch this go by. Mark Pope, by the way, there's a unique story here on Mark Pope's recruitment with Silas right now. Shout out to once again Jacob Polachek. I feel like we're giving him a shout out like every other day during portal season. But go follow him if you haven't at Polachek KSR because he's doing great reporting on all things Kentucky here. And apparently, Kentucky and Mark Pope were on a Zoom call with Silas over the weekend. And then Pope jokingly said, "What are you guys doing for dinner?" And then a few hours later, that turned into Mark Pope driving in home to be in this household and have dinner with Silas and family. So once again, Mark Pope's quirky nature just coming to fruition here. But that gives you a sense of how Kentucky, I think, is prioritizing this. That news coming with the news that Kirk Reese is entering the transfer portal. Pretty clear that Kentucky is trying to get a superstar guard in some form here. They missed on Donovan Dent, and feels like Silas is now priority 1A for Kentucky. Out of the schools that we mentioned here, so St. John's, Kentucky, UConn, BYU, and Auburn. Do any of those jump out at you as like the ideal fit for Silas?
Oh man, I could like he would do really well. Like BYU Auburn, it's tough to argue with what they've done for guards. Same with Kentucky. I mean, part of it is just like he has that Otega Owe type build to where I could see Pope kind of maximizing him as a defender, but he's also a pretty good shooter. I think he's a better shooter than Owe to where, yeah, it's easy to see him slot in there. But my favorite fit is UConn. It's the guard room was sorely needed an upgrade this past season. And I just think if you put him like there would be I would say I don't really think he's a true point guard, yet I would be very intrigued by the Silas Demary solo ball backcourt. Like I kind of think Hurley could unlock something to like he can make reads out of ball screens. He's a good passer. He just is a little turnover prone to where I like if he wants to play in the NBA and like be perceived as a point guard, I feel like I just trust Hurley to maximize that more than any other coach.
Yeah. Well, it's such a loaded list where, sometimes I ask this like, where should he go? And there's an obvious answer. If the list is really those five schools, you're talking about Dan Hurley, Rick Pitino, Mark Pope, Bruce Pearl, and then Kevin Young is probably the outlier there, but he was awesome in year one with BYU, took him to a Sweet 16, runs a pro heavy system. Um, I don't really think you can go wrong with who you're trying to play for. All of these are guard friendly systems. I mean, you talk about stepping into BYU, you could be there with Richie Saunders and AJ DeBansa. You talk about UConn. I mean, you just mentioned how open their guard unit was this year. And the one thing I would say on the UConn fit, I think that UConn should go after a more traditional point guard type than Silas. Not that he can't play the role, but I think if you're trying to bring back solo ball and Braylon Mullins is coming in, and I guess you don't know what's going on with Caravan or the fours, but to me, you have your two, your three, your four, your five pretty much figured out if you're UConn. I would want a true floor general type at the point. I don't think that's Silas. To me, he would be much better as like the two here, the shooting guard in a system, than he would be the one. So,
Right.
look, I think Dan Hurley would figure it out. But out of the five that we mentioned, that's the one that feels a little, yeah, I don't know to me. I can't shake the idea of him at St. John's.
Yeah, yeah. I think like I wanted to make a Tristan Newton type argument for Dimmery just because they're both 6'5" and bucket getters. But even if you look at Tristan Newton's assist numbers at ECU, he was like a lot closer to a true point guard before coming to UConn than I think Demery is. To where maybe you're right. Maybe it is he slots right into like kind of RJ Lewis's shots, all those that have been vacated now, and just gets those. And I'm also curious to see what Patino could do with him defensively. Like to me, he's coming from what was Georgia this past year? They were like a top 25 defense for a lot of the season. They finished the year 31st on Kimpom, but like he had really good steal numbers this past year, which I know Patino's probably got to be enticed by. I would expect to even see those rocket up if he ends up playing for the Johnnies. But yeah, I think like just having the frame, the length, and some of those instincts there, Patino could really succeed with that. And yeah, he'd be walking into a situation where there's like 15 shots a game that need to be taken, and I think he'd happily oblige that.
And for lack of a better word, he got the dog in him that I feel like just maps with a Rick
Yeah.
Pitino guard. So, yeah. But again, he goes to any of these five. I think I'm like, damn, that's a great fit. He's gonna thrive. I just the number one I close my eyes and see it is St. John's, especially with RJ Lewis out of there and shots needing to be taken. So we'll see. Will be very interesting to see who gets Silas Demery because he's an awesome player and his list reflects that. We'll have more coverage on him as this recruitment progresses.
It is March, and that means that March Madness is upon us. And if you are looking for a place to play, Underdog Fantasy has you covered. Sign up and deposit using code SLEEPERS, that's code SLEEPERS, to receive up to $1,000 in bonus credit plus a free pick. Head over to Underdog Fantasy today and use promo code SLEEPERS to take advantage of this amazing offer.